Never seen a smile so big on my little old lady's face until I tell her I'm going fishing all weekend. Pack up all of my bait and I make plans for 7:45 and I swing around, pick up my date for the weekend. Some reason she seems to please when I'm leaving. There's something I'm missing when I'm gone fishing. When I'm gone fishing. When I'm gone fishing.
Yeah, baby.
Yes, sir. It's Monday yet again. How is everyone? Hope everyone had a fantastic weekend. Nice to see a bunch of you already showed up. It's Mondays are always busy, whether they're here at CFN or in your lives. The hustle and bustle that I'm sure everybody's getting ready for Christmas and various parties that you're getting to, family events, this, that, and everything else. But you know what? For all you that stop by to say hello on a Monday, we appreciate it. Barry's in the house. Nice to see you, Steve. Rob Alspash is here as well. Maddie, what's up, brother? Lloyd's in the house. Nice to see you, Lloyd. Tony's here. Norm, what's up, buddy? Howdy, freaks. Bass freaks indeed. Jeanette's with us. Sally Mitchell's here. The regulars are always here front and center. And as I said, love you for that. Big shout out to Yvonne last week. Great guest, Lorianne Hurst. I tell you, she taught us a lot about what is edible, how to hunt for it, how to enjoy it, how to cook it, what she's busy. And we were just saying this before we went live backstage. I don't think there's a lady that Yvonne has had on, including herself, that is not busy. And I mean busy, like ridiculously busy, doing a whole bunch of stuff. I tell you, to those ladies, hats off, because you are busy gals. And Lorianne was no exception. She was just as busy as the rest of them. But I tell you, holy smokes. I'm actually surprised they have time to visit with us on a Monday, as busy as they are. I do have a great announcement, really quick announcement. There's not too much to talk about. If there is anything that anybody wants to bring up, please do in the comments. Tim Barron, nice to see you. Terry's in the house. Joe Moore's with us. Awesome. Well, you know what? It's going to be yet another great show. But before we get to that, I do have a huge announcement, which of course is our Christmas giveaway, Fish Like a Beeler for Christmas. And of course, this is just a snippet of the tackle pack that we have available, because there is quite a bit well, let's put it this way. This tackle box is going to be rammed full of stuff. And I just want to go through and thank everybody as we're playing this video. Big shout out to the Beeler's tackle box, obviously, for one. Got to thank River Reaper Fishing, Meigs Lures, Ugly Boys Baits, Outdoor Flavors, True North Baits, Bull River Blog for Mike Robertson, and his bait as well will be in one of the sleeves. North Shore Tackle, Accessible Angling, Lures for Vets, Fish Whipped Apparel, Cabby's Custom Hair Jigs, and of course our big man, Big Jim McLaughlin, has given quite a donation to this. Mad Scientist Baits. We also have the Johnson Lure Company, Fishing with C4 Lures, and there will be more as time goes on. I know Jason Barnucz has mentioned that there is going to be something that's available from Berkeley. So we do have a lot of stuff still to come But for right now, I can honestly say whoever is going to win this is going to take home an incredible amount of tackle. And as I said, you're not only going to fish like a Beeler, you're going to fish like the entire CFN community. So what I have been trying to do is, of course, go through all of the posts, and I will put up this Christmas tree with the verified sign and wishing you guys and gals a good luck. So if you see that on your post, you're verified, you're on the list, you're on the wheel. But I just want to let everybody know we are literally just shy of 700 ballots that have already been cast. I've had to use the neighbors' fingers and toes to do the count, but it is all listed. It's all ready to go. The draw will be Boxing Day. We'll do a live, whether it'll be all four of us together or perhaps just myself. I might give the lads the night off, but we will announce the winner Boxing Day, and we will get this jam-packed, full of stuff tackle box out to you. And you will, as I said, not only fish like a Beeler, but you're going to fish like the entire CFN community. So awesome stuff. So please make sure all you have to do is go to the very pinned post. It's probably just above the live feed for tonight. Make sure you tag up to 3 people. You can tag up to 3 people. I know some people have tagged 6 and 9 and 12. I don't care. At the end of the day, we are going to allow you 3 ballots for the 3 people you've tagged. If they manage to tag you back and wish you a happy holiday and Merry Christmas, you will get up to six ballots. And as I said, right now, we are just shy of 700 ballots. So there is a bunch of you that have done some arduous work, and we truly appreciate that. So again, right after the live, you will see the post. It will be pinned. It'll be above this live. Make sure if you haven't enter. All you got to do is tag 3 people and wish them a Merry Christmas, a happy holiday, a happy New Year, whatever you wish. And if they happen to tag you back, you get 6 ballots put on the wheel. And as I said, the draw will be on Boxing Day. Yes, absolutely, Sally. Good luck to everyone. And remember, there's nothing like a CFN Christmas. Couldn't have said it better myself, Sally. And on that note, of course, let's bring in the big man, Big Jim McLaughlin. He's up next. And of course, a word from our sponsor. Big Jim McLaughlin, how are you doing, Slim Jim?
Boom shakalaka, I'm alive.
Yes, absolutely. And
not by much.
Before we start, of course, Steve Shaw shared something. Their Bass Freaks Canada Central Chapter is doing a toy drive for the kiddies. Reach out to Norm Heyman. If you can help out, please do so. There's the link. Thanks, Steve, for sharing that. But, of course, some great initiatives that are going on for not only CFN, but, of course, all the kiddies out there that probably could use, some Christmas cheer. But, Jim, thanks so much for all your donations. I'm going to have a hard time getting them all into one of the slots, but needless to say, Bud, big thank you for your generous.
Well, I can always find something. I was just sitting here the other day, and I brought this piece of a little dresser. I don't know whether you can see it. It's a little thing with drawers down here.
Yeah.
You can just see it there.
Yeah.
So I brought that out of the garage. It wasn't getting used out there, and I thought, I'll bring that out. I'll stick it beside my desk here. So now the drawers are like full to the roof. You can't find anything in one summer.
Oh, jeez.
Like absolutely just like it's just packed. There's people are always sending you stuff, and it's just full. Like I got, like I got bags of jigs that I've had sent to me.
Unreal.
Our buddy Martin over at Grumpy there sent me a bunch of his craws and stuff. And it was really funny too, because when he sent this stuff to me, he's in the very, very beginning when he started making his stuff, he didn't have that really nice package, right?
Yeah.
It's a stellar package. It's a stellar. So he sends me a box. It's about, I don't know, it's about 30, 40 bags of it here, all different kinds of stuff. And I had bought a couple of bags of this stuff, not like when he was first out, because I saw that little weenie craw that he had, this here, and this was the bag that he had before, and I was using these on the back of my jigs, my little finesse flipping jigs and stuff that I round out the back with. And it was really funny. All of a sudden, I get that stuff in the mail, and I look at it, and I go, "Oh no, now I know whose stuff it is, eh?" And he says, "I remember, sending you stuff." I said, "I did, and I paid for it. Look, there's a price tag on it." he says, "Well, if you ever want anything, just call me."
No, I'd have to say, I mean, he makes a lot of plastics, different types of plastics, but the one thing that I really took a liking to was, of course, his goby pattern. He's got a wicked goby pattern.
Yeah, he's I actually got him working. He has quite a extensive background knowledge about gobies and everything to do with them. He's not a scientist. Well, I don't think he is, but he's talked to me about, and I'm trying to get him to write an article for Just Fishing on all the different kinds of gobies and things and everything. So hopefully the spring issue we might have something from him. So that would be really cool.
Grumpy Baits, if you get a chance, go over and have a look at them. Another great plastic Canadian company. That's the other thing too.
So many, and I've been looking around here, and there's so much stuff coming. Like I was looking the other day here. I was trying to dig out some ice fishing stuff because hopefully I get to do a good bit more of it. And I dug out a bunch of Jamie stuff from True North Baits, the mayflies.
Yeah.
He sent me down, and I'm not sure what this little guy's called off the top of my head, but it's just a killer looking little bait.
It is great for drop shot and
killer looking little bait. But,
thanks for bringing that up too, Jim, because we put together all the provincial prizes for all our provincial winners for the CFN Fish Shop. And of course, I was going through some of the True North baits that were generously donated by Jamie, and they were in them. And I don't know if they were squirts or what they were, but not the McFlies. They were
mayflies. Yeah,
I think they were squirts. Those were squirts, but I could be wrong. Oh, they're mini vaders. That's what they're called, mini vaders.
Yeah, there's so many guys now making plastic, like small operations. It seems like it's big to them, but in the scope of things, it's pretty small. But because 100%. It's something that they can do. The molds are available. You can get the plastic. The knowledge is there. I mean, all the tools now, all the injectors and everything, you can get it. And then there's a couple of guys in Kingston making it that I know of because I see them here close by. There's Great Lakes. Dan, Dan from MPS, he's got the stuff that he's making now. I don't know if I had any of that kicking here, but he's got that going. But he's making that little. I got one of Jamie's plastics here. This I was using out the back here this summer. One of the sort of shad-shaped bodies that like a lot of guys have those. But Great Lake Finesse has this little tail spinner and or belly spinner, and it's just phenomenal. Like they spent so much time going through it and doing it. But I don't work for them, right? I think it's just I got a handful from them, and it's amazing, and it's because of the way the arm extends to the back. It just always swims, and it swims perfect, because that's something that I've long known too. Being sick here for the last couple of weeks, I've been getting a lot of this stuff here tied up for walleye season, and see the way the little arm on the bottom here on most of the molds that you get, It's straight down, so it hangs back. As long as it holds it away from the body, it'll spin really well. But and that's pretty long, actually. I use the larger size of the wires, so it gets it further away from the body. I've been trying to get it going with the Marabou, but it wants to spin underneath Marabou, and that doesn't work. Marabou likes to just wind itself up,
Right.
It's a mess. But no, I'm telling you, boy, there's a lot of people aren't ice fishing yet, and the water out there is. My backyard froze there a couple of nights ago, and it's looks like we got some -8, -10 stuff coming here. It's pretty chilly this morning here. It was -10 again, just for a brief period there at sunup, but it's coming.
Our Western folks are probably they're snickering at us right now because they hear us complaining. They've been dealing with -30 degree temperatures out that way, and of course they don't just have ice; they've got a foot of it in some places even more.
Yeah, a guy sent me a picture of him. He has a stick with a nail on the end, so he puts it down and over comes up, and he was just shy of 16. So yeah, but he's up in northern Saskatchewan. He's in the middle of nowhere. He's not like you ask him what's the closest town, and he's 4 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, he's chooses to live like that. That's what he does. He enjoys it. He lives in a small little community, and he has a great time up there. But he said like they were ice fishing. I think he said on the 2nd of November. So they've got and ice fishing with a 4-wheeler.
Jeez.
Yeah, so it's just one
totally different. Barry's just informing us that there's still open water up in the Timmins area, which this time of year is kind of hard to believe. And I know Bill has been sharing on our Legacy chat some cold nights that they've been having, but the fact that they still have open water up in Timmins, wow, I'm surprised.
Yeah, you probably got a lot of backwaters because there was guys fishing north of 7 here this morning, but they're the 2-inch heroes, eh?
Yeah. Well, this is my concern, Jim, and this is what I was going to get to. Even though we're having some cold temps that are coming up, we are also getting quite a snowstorm. And to the folks out west, that you don't need to hear this because you're already dealing with all that. But this is what concerns me: is whatever ice we are going to have is going to be blanketed by snow, and it's going to look safe. When in actual fact,
well, if it does, see, the thing is, when it's only this thick, when the snow lands, the water comes up, it turns it all to slush, then it freezes, and you have a foot of white ice. And white ice is strong if it's really thick. It's like anything else, I mean, it's all about just So it isn't as strong as black ice, but if it's a foot thick, you can, a foot of white ice is still pretty damn strong,
100%.
When it gets, because you'll see, I see the snow out in the back here. It'll happen. And because I see it daily, it's really cool to watch because there'll be 5-6 inches of snow, and then it weights it down, and you see it get dark around the shore because the water's coming up on top, and it runs into the low spot, soaks that snow, it compacts down, and it freezes. And a day after that, they're out there with the shovels, and they're all skating, and they got this much white ice with this much black underneath it. But just to skate or to walk, you're safe on that. As long as the temperatures are low, keeping the ice good and frozen, it's amazing what you can put on it. Like, I'm not recommending anybody go out and test it to the limits. Obviously, it's what you do is up to you. But man, oh man, it's it'll be here. Yeah, just like Steve just said there, it'll come. Be patient. I mean, I always just to look at even years ago when it was. The winter seems to come a lot earlier. It always seemed to be just before Christmas that you got on the ice around here. I'm talking, when I say here, I mean like more up towards Ottawa, like 3/4 of the way to Ottawa, fishing on the Big Rideau or the Rideau River or something. It was always just before Christmas. So it's, it's not really that late, but it's,
No, you're right. And I would say we were probably in most cases out on ice or had available ice this time last year. I don't know exactly how safe it was because
last year was early.
So as I said, in some cases it was okay. In others it was not. And unfortunately we did lose a couple of people from our community last year because of unsafe ice. So I'm hoping that we don't repeat that this year. So again, as Jim will always say, if when in doubt, spot it out and make sure you're safe as heck. And
when in doubt, watch football.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when in doubt, yeah, absolutely, don't bother going out. But
No. Something else I want to talk about, Scotty, was I was talking to a buddy of mine today, and I said, "Then what are you up to? I haven't heard from you for a while." And he says, I was down south. He's retired, and he flits around. He's single. He got the bug to go to Arizona, so he went to Arizona for a month.
Okay.
Flew in, rented a car, drove around Arizona for a month, met some people somewhere, hung out with them for a week, went fishing with a couple of guys there that he met, and whatever stuff like that. And I said, he said to me, I spent the last three or four days there, and he says, I've been sorting all my ice fishing stuff because he's an ice fishing freak. Like he's not down in Florida in the winter. He's ice fishing. He's got a couple of little cottages on different lakes, and he's always at it, eh? And he said to me something that you hear me comment on often. He's like converting everything he has. Like he doesn't have any more garbage ice fishing stuff, as he said. And I was talking and I was just thinking about it, and little things like, just look at a plain simple Sedona ice rod. These are like $45, $50. That's almost the norm now of what people buy. Yeah. Just of a regular, panfish type perch ice fishing rod.
Yep. And
they used to buy a rod. When I worked at Fishing Buddies, I got if you tried to get $10 out of them for an ice fishing rod, you were a crook. Like they just didn't buy expensive stuff like that, eh? It wasn't done. And then he's also talking to me about, he's got himself a bunch of the Loomis IMX ice fishing rods, which, as you know, are like they weigh nothing.
Yeah.
It's like ridiculous how light they are. They're $250, $275.
Wow. He's
got 10 of them. He's changed all his $30 and $40 rods for, $12 ice.
Jeez.
Putting a Sedona reel on them or something, or something like that. He's putting all. He found some place in the States, and he bought 10 Maravals. He wants them on his ice fishing rods. He was telling me about all the stuff he's done, but that's what ice fishing has become. It's not the same as it used to be. It's not a guy out with a big chunk of green line with a 6-aught hook and a sucker minnow and a 2-pound sinker on the bottom, hoping to get a bite. It's really changed. Like ice fishing has grown up even more than I ever dreamed it would. When I first got involved with Dave Gens and the guys at Clan there years ago, that's like 20 plus years ago now, 25 years ago. And what they had then and what they have now, like when you look at the fish traps and the clams and all that stuff now, I had an old one I gave to a guy here a couple of years ago, and it was one that Dave Gens gave to me when he was up here. And it had the old wooden bench seat in it that was all bowed, that kind, you know what I'm saying? Like it was. Now they've got seats that adjust every way. It's like having a seat in a friggin' Suburban. You know what I mean? Like they slide up, they go sideways, they tilt back. They've got beautiful pads. They got lumbar supports on them. You sit on them all day. Yeah, you might get stiff, but it's not like in the old days. Where you need 15 minutes when you got up to be able to move if you sat there all day.
Well, Jim, and you know what? It all depends on the audience that we have with us. But you're 100% right in the sense that it has evolved. Used to go out with a Canadian Tire special, and that's probably
it's just what it was.
That's how it was. But as A-Rod has mentioned, now we've got you don't just go out with a little electronic like a little Eagle or something that you picked up from Canadian Tire. You've got live scopes now. You've got fish flashers that basically are some of the best technology. And I think it was Dave Chong that said, a lot of the technology that we have now is equal to what they had in World War II. Like that's amazing that we've come this.
Well, look at Gord Pizer's buddy works at NASA.
Yeah,
and the electronics that we had on the boats 10 years ago. The GPS stuff was superior to what they went to the moon with the first time.
Yeah. Oh, dear. I remember those days. You remember those days where you'd bring the shopping bags, you'd have them in your tackle box, you'd have to put them in your boots halfway out. Oh, yeah, I remember all that. There's another guy that would probably remember that as well. And so,
hey, Ed,
how far we've come and what we are seeing, it's the future is only going to get more and more.
I mean, like the huts are insulated. They have heaters that aren't going to kill you. They have, God bless. There was people that died every year sitting with propane heaters in huts with no vents.
Yeah.
My first fishing
it was actually cool. Barry,
I heard you're still fishing with branches. Yeah. You can find it. Getting the pictures.
We had the luxury of going out with some First Nations, and they showed us some of the traditional ice fishing methods that they have. It was really fascinating to see. But again, to your point, you show up with a $250 rod, and they're looping their line around a cedar branch.
And you have to pick those little willow branches. I had a guy from up by Bob's Lake here show that to me years ago when they fished for brook trout. Wow. He had some little loop that they would put in the line, and it didn't knot when it came off. It was really neat, and they just sit that little loop, and they take up their pocket knife and make up, or almost like it was like razor sharp, and they would peel back like about a 64th of an inch of bark just to make a little hook to hold that. And when the fish bit, it would pull for a second and then fall off. Yeah. And they did that to fish for brook trout. They'd have a couple of lines. They'd back off about 50 feet away and just sit still. And sure enough, it worked back then as well. But there's better ways of doing things. There really is. And a lot of people are a lot more active now. They don't want to use set lines. Everybody used to have a 5-gallon pail with tip-ups in it. You don't see that as much anymore. I was always a big advocate of tip-ups, even when I got into fishing. Dave Gens used to say, "You're really going to put a tip-up down?" And inevitably, almost every time we fished, I'd catch the biggest fish on the tip-up. Because it was off to the side, other fish would come, you'd see them on the Vexlar, they'd be looking, they'd go away, you'd maybe see some big fish come through. But that was the best fishing buddy I ever had when I started ice fishing.
Yeah.
But now we've just become so active at what we do. Like we look for fish now. You don't drive out on the ice, stand there and go, well, I guess this is a good spot, and you're 300 yards offshore, and you have like the lake's snow. So we'll drill a hole here and hope we get a bite before we freeze to death.
Well, I honestly, and he's listening, so we got to be very quiet. But Jay Barnucz, I can't imagine that man going out drilling 2 or 3 holes, having maybe one tip up, another that he's jigging in another hole, and waiting and being that patient. Knowing him and what I've heard, 200-300 holes is not out of the norm for him to drill, in an outing. So he would not have the patience of the yesteryear style of ice fishing.
You talked to Dave Gens when he made the comment about drilling 100 holes once.
Yeah.
And he said that was the biggest mistake he made in his career.
Really?
Ever saying that publicly.
Wow.
There's guys out there you talk to, oh yeah, we had to drill like 500 holes, on Saturday. You haven't drilled 500 holes in your life. What are you talking about? You drilled 500 on Saturday. Oh. It's like the guys that catch 150 largemouths in an afternoon.
Yeah.
I don't know. They need the little clicker.
100%.
And you have to remember it that you put it back to 0 each time you go fishing.
Yeah. This brings me to a question that I'll ask you, Jim. When it comes to toothy critters, like for instance, pike. Let's just talk about pike. Do you prefer jigging with a rod,
yeah.
or do you prefer a tip
across
up?
the board? If you want to go just hunt for trophies, like you want to go up in northwestern Ontario, look up with Gord Pizer or someplace like that, when they fish for these big pike in these little back lakes that they get to that are basically untouched except in the winter, and nobody keeps the fish because you're catching the 44-inch pike. You're not bringing that home.
Yeah,
that's just the faux pas. You don't do that. There's no reason to do that. Especially with all the cameras that you have now, you can, in your phones, you can get pictures. Everything's always done like that. Unless it really twigs you, you're not breaking the law. I guess if you want to keep it, you can.
Yeah.
But who wants to eat a pike that's that old anyway? But when they fish for these fish, I mean, it's all set lines and they're off the ice. Cool. Quite often they're actually sitting on shore around a fire.
Yeah. So I have to ask, folks that are watching and listening, if you are fishing toothy critters like pike, do you prefer to jig them or do you prefer to have a tip up and a live bait presentation?
Well, I mean, it works. Like you put down a dead bait or something like that. If you're in an area with lots of pike, well, not even lots, but preferably some bigger ones. I mean, it's really a deal. I mean, there's no doubt that pike eat. I mean, like they don't sell all the quick strike rigs that they make for nothing,
100%. So again, another question I'd love to ask is if we do get some hard water, and perhaps maybe you are on the hard water, what fish or species of fish are you going to target first when you get the first chance to get out there? A-Rod is saying crappie for him. I would probably say Manny would love to go after some pike. Erica has mentioned, as I said, that she will be going after pike, but also will be doing crappie and walleye. Jim, if you were back in your heyday, I know you probably answered this 100 times. So here's 101. The first species, would it be bluegill?
Bluegills and crappies, yeah.
That's what I figured.
Because I would have looked for them in the fall. That's something that more people need to do.
Yeah.
I would have looked for them in the fall, and there's a good chance that where I drilled the first hole, I get bit. I get bit big time because I knew where they were like less than a month before that.
Yeah. And
at that time of the year, they haven't began that transition to get out of the weeds into the deeper water. And even that, like they don't all leave the weeds. It's just that there's less in the weeds. They're harder to find. You drill holes. If you drill over thick weed, it's really hard to fish, to use electronics in thick weed. So most people, they don't want to do that. It's one of those things you really, really have to learn. You really, really have to learn. It's one of those things. But I mean, in the heyday of Quinty, I mean, man, as soon as that froze, we were there.
100%.
As soon as it froze, we were there. But I remember them driving on Quinty.
Yeah, well, this is a thing, Jim. Like, I mean, what we are dealing with from a hard water perspective now to what it was back in the day. Like I remember Belleville being frozen by now. Like, you would go out, there'd be huts. I don't know how many huts, hundreds and hundreds of huts this time of year out on Belleville. So yeah, it's a little bit different. I don't want to get into the global warming thing, but it has changed to a certain degree, and perhaps maybe one day it'll get back to everything's cyclical. So who knows? Maybe we'll get back to that.
Yeah, I was noticing the other day there they were showing something on the news about they had found some new DNA in a glacier somewhere.
Yes,
and that's when the guy was talking, and they were trying to discuss what they had found.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found was that there used to be big rabbit-like creatures, is what they felt from the DNA, along with mastodons up in the Arctic, which meant you had to have giant green plants. And they were trying to discuss where this glacier originated from, which ice age.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Eastern Lake Ontario has been glaciated 4 times. That they have real solid proof that it happened.
And not just frozen over. Like, we're talking a mile at least of ice.
Yeah, well, like 10,000 years ago, there was a mile of ice on top of Algonquin Park.
Yeah.
So it all disappeared. Nothing to do with us. We weren't even a factor yet.
Yeah.
And it'll be back again.
Yeah.
It'll be back again because it's done it 4 times already that they can positively get up. I've looked into this a lot about the glaciation. And when they talk about some of the marks that are on the bottom of Lake Ontario from glaciers, it's pretty cool.
100%.
Yeah, that they've lasted this long.
Yes, Tina, we are all anxious, but as Jim always will say, temper that anxiousness with some good common sense, so that we're not, and make sure you have that. Jim, before you go, there has been a couple questions in here. How you feeling?
I'm alive. Today was the first day I somehow was alive. Like I told you, I went to the dump and everything today and did a bunch of running around. And I came home and I don't know, I decided I was going to take a nap for half an hour and I slept. Well, I woke up I fell asleep and I woke up and said, holy crap, 2 hours and 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm beat up. There's not much in me.
Well,
But
listen,
it's definitely gone. It just really got a hold of me.
yeah,
It's,
it did. It
I've
was,
talked, and because of the posts I did on Facebook, the number of people that have messaged me
yeah,
and said, you sure you didn't have COVID? I said, no, we went through the 3-pack. It wasn't COVID. This had nothing to do. It was all primarily just in my sinuses, and it got into my throat a little bit, but just in my throat, not into my lungs. So I did what I preached. I stayed home. We found some old freezer burned chicken soup, and I ate that.
oh boy.
Oh, it was priceless. Some of the things, like I'm so blessed to have people care about me. I had people send me notes of what to do and drink this, take that. I had, and I looked one up too, and apparently it's old folklore. A lady from out west, she told me, she said, try sleeping with onions in your socks. It was an old thing. So I looked it up, and it's folklore. Like they thought it was real. Now I didn't get that far, but there was other people telling me, chicken soup is magic. Chicken soup's magic anytime.
Yeah,
Forget,
it is.
like I'd get sick if you only got chicken soup. What you were saying.
Wow. Onions in your socks.
Some of the notes I got from people, like literally, there was hundreds of comments and notes.
Right on. Well, that's awesome. And to all of our community, if you did reach out to Jim, thank you so much for doing that. We love this big guy here, and we love the fact that he comes here every Monday and puts on a brave face and soldiers through yet another Monday Live. It's the best half hour. It's the first half hour of the best hour and a half of Facebook Live. And Jim, we can't thank you enough for all you do for us, bud. You have a great week.
Enjoy. Be safe out there, right?
Absolutely. Thanks, dude. All the
Be
best.
good, buddy.
Can't do this every Monday without these three lads, and Jim is a huge part of that. Again, my hat goes off. As Sally had mentioned on a live before, I hope you're rewarding them. I wish I could. I really wish I could. We talk about it all the time, but we're going to do a little something for them. It's upcoming. Hopefully you folks will be able to see it. But Lawrence is going to be coming up next with a whole bunch of news, so stay tuned right after this. Big Lawrence Gunther in the house. How you doing, Lawrence?
I'm doing well, my friend. How are you?
Oh, living the dream, as they say, living the dream. As I said, this is the power hour and a half, and you are right in the middle, sandwiched just like an Oreo. We love you. And I know you've got, I can't say the word, you just got a ton of news to share with us. But I wanted to start with, of course, something that was shared to us in regards to the Great Lakes Local Action Fund. It was impressive to see a number of like $1.9 million being spread out over 38 separate projects and initiatives. Some of the ones that were featured on the post, Friends of the Second Marsh, who will be removing invasive, I'm not going to pronounce that, but let's just say the invasive species of some sort from the Second Marsh Wildlife Area and the McLaughlin Bay Wildlife Reserve in Lake Ontario watershed. With the help of community volunteers and professionals. Georgian Bay Forever is another great initiative who will work with students and volunteers to collect 1,000 pounds of plastic litter through at least 10 shoreline cleanups around Georgian Bay. That's pretty cool.
That's fantastic.
Watersheds Canada, who will work with the local communities. And I think you and I were talking about this one, including the Mohawks and Akwesasne landowners, to plant 2,000 native tree shrubs and wildflowers to reduce shoreline erosion and safeguard wildlife habitat along the St. Lawrence River, which is right around your neck of the woods. And of course, the last one that they featured was Oakville Green. He will provide local youth with hands-on training in building several rain gardens that will help soak up heavy rains and provide native plants for pollinators in the Lake Ontario watershed. Some great initiatives. I love some of the things that they were featured. It seemed that water quality was at the forefront. If it wasn't water quality, it was about shoreline restoration and rehabilitation. My concern, and I'll let you take it after I ask this of you, When you see this many projects and the amount of money that is being spread over this many initiatives, I think the highest I saw was close to $50,000. If you're going to be planting trees, I don't know if anybody's priced a tree lately, and depending on the size of tree that they'll be planting, you're not going to plant a heck of a lot of them. So unless these initiatives get continuous funding from this Great Lakes Local Action Fund, it will eventually make a difference. But if they don't, is $40,000 in tree planting enough, in your opinion?
I've been following Watersheds Canada and their shoreline restoration work for a number of years now, and they really developed some expertise on this. And I'm not saying they're behind all of these different initiatives, but they are sort of have a lot of playbooks out there that a lot of people are referencing. It's all about native plants. We're not talking chestnut trees or maple trees or, elm trees or so on. These are sort of the trees that you would normally find along the shoreline, trees that are resilient to flooding, trees that can stand up to being, submerged for a month at a time when the shoreline floods, trees that, can stand a lot of wind, a lot of erosion acting with strong roots. They don't get too big. We're not talking giant trees that are going to topple over right away. These are trees, that are smaller, sort of medium-sized trees, and a lot of shrubs, a lot of plants, a lot of ground cover. That's what they're trying to do here. And it's good. A lot of cottagers, property owners, have been eliminating that stuff right to the shoreline because they like that sort of manicured look of the lawn that goes right to the beach and in the sand and goes into the water, and there's no weeds, and the grandchildren and the children run in and out of the water, and no one's getting scared by the weeds. So that's sort of, the ideal kind of cottage property, right? That's where you pay the most money if you have that kind of a water access with a sandy beach. So people pay for that, and people try to landscape for that. And that's unfortunate because they've been cutting down these trees and cutting down these shrubs and bushes and planting grass. And then what do you get? You got a lot of rain. It just washes the fertilizer off the lawn right into the lake. You get some strong wave action. Grass is not known for a hardy root structure unless you're looking at sort of the sawblade grass on the east coast of Canada, but that's not what they're planting. So getting those shrubs and trees back, those native shrubs and trees back along the shoreline, it builds resilience. It's the best kind of resilience for sure to stop soil erosion,
Right.
from water, high water levels and big waves and things like that. But, Scotty, I have to say, there's nothing stopping the person who owns that property from cutting all those things down again in 5 or 10 years, right?
Yeah, so there's that as well, and of course, I love how you said, if you really truly want to make shoreline erosion at least decrease from what it currently is now, we got to think into the water as well, especially when you're talking about fish habitat.
Oh yeah, well that's the other thing. It stops at the water's edge.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I've had this conversation with Watersheds Canada too, and they've got onto this now, and they realize, let's not stop at the water's edge. Let's go right in there and talk about the importance of lily pads and the other types of fish habitat that's so crucial to the nurseries and the spawning of our sports fish, right? And so they're into that now, but there's not many that are. Most cottagers, they still pull the weeds out, and legally they're allowed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, and of course we can only do our part to explain to them how important those weeds are and what they do for the fish, on a whole. But and again, I don't want to sound critical by any means. $1.9 million is a good chunk of money. It would certainly get me out of debt, and I would live free and clear with that kind of cash. When you hear some of the other initiatives that are being done by our government, of course, this is a hate session on government, but you hear some of the money that we're spending in other places. 1.9 is a very small number, but again, 38 initiatives, 38 incredible ideas and concepts and organizations that are being led by stakeholders and fishing groups, community groups. They're doing some great work.
Employment. Yeah, a lot of youth employment. There are a lot of summer jobs, right?
100%. So it's not all bad. it's good, and it is certainly a nice start in the right direction. But to me, as I said, I think if we were to poll everybody that's watching and the entire community, as I said, I think everybody would agree. I wish we could do more. I wish we could see more being done, and some of the money that is being spent, I would say questionably, could be allocated to more initiatives like this.
Well, if we didn't, if we stop people from doing this in the first place, like cutting the brush and the trees and the shrubs down to the shore in the first place, we wouldn't need to pay to have it put back, and then the hope and cross our fingers that it doesn't get cut down by the next property owner who says, it's blocking my view. If you go on a lake in Quebec where they have rules about not cutting down anything, not even the grass, within 30 or 50 feet of the shoreline, depending on the slope, the angle of the slope, you'll see it's a huge difference. You go along a lake in Quebec and you see a path coming down to the water, and you don't see the cottage necessarily. You don't see the sheds and the bric-a-brac and all the other toys and everything else spread out on the lawns. You don't see that. You just see nature. You see a lot of trees, a lot of nature from the water. It was some paths and a dock and maybe a boat at the dock, but it looks really natural. The lakes look way more natural than the lakes do on the Ontario side, which are all manicured, right?
Wow, I did not know that. And Sally, yes, you're 100% right. Steve mentioned that there are a lot of invasive plants that call our watersheds home. But there's a fun fact. Did you know that the common bulrush sucks up poisons in the water? No, makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Trees take the poisons out of the air and clean the air. So I would imagine that whoever it was, Mother Nature or the big boy upstairs, he always has a plan. There is always a method to his madness, and if bulrushes take out that poison, then that's awesome. Good.
But a lot of those bulrushes, a lot of the different species of those are invasive too, and they don't make very, very good fish habitat.
Yeah.
It's just it crowds it out and then eventually gets filled in, and it's a curse to a wetland. And bulrushes often because it's the last step before Mother Nature just fills in behind and turns it into sort of a wet, sort of soppy soil, and that's it for the wetland, right? It just becomes more of a swamp kind of thing, and then land.
Well, thanks for your perspective on that. Always enjoy listening to you in regards to some of the stuff that's going on in everyday news that maybe not all of us know about. But I do know that you have quite a few bullet points that you want to get to as well tonight. So here we go.
All right, man. So my if you look at the Bluefish News, a little self-promotion here for Bluefish Canada and my podcast, the Bluefish Radio Show, a really good interview there with Tom Rowland. He is the executive producer of 3 fishing TV shows, highly popular TV shows in Florida. He's a past tournament angler, a guide, started as a guide, and now he's a popular podcaster too with the Tom Rowland podcast. And I reached out to him to say, Tom, what are you guys doing down there in terms of catch and release? I call it catch, care, release, because they've got a lot of really innovative and far-thinking kind of efforts being made to manage the fish in ways that ensure their survival post-release, right? And they've really done a lot of study on this, and all depending on the species of fish and the time of day and what's around. It's absolutely amazing. Like tarpon, you cannot bring tarpon into the boat anymore when you catch a tarpon. And Tom tells me too that even if they have a leader touch thing, if you touch the leader, that's an official capture technically. And if there's sharks around, if he sees sharks around, he'll just break off right away. He'll just break off the line. But he's got a whole bunch of techniques the guides are using down there to ensure the tarpon go back safe and healthy and avoid the sharks and grouper and bonefish and permit and reds. And it's quite amazing that how they're evolving all this. Even descending devices have become the law for rockfish when you're returning fish down deep again, that because of bear trauma, the expanded swim bladder. Lots of things we can learn from them. So there's an editorial there, so check that out.
Very cool.
And so number 2, here's some bad news. The Marine Stewardship Council is an international organization, a nonprofit that works with commercial fisheries to certify them as sustainable. So they go and check out how you're doing your fishing, how the fish you're fishing for, and the pressure you're putting on those fish stocks. And if they can determine that the fishing is sustainable and is going to go on and on and on, and you're not going to wipe out the fish, you get to use their Marine Stewardship Council logo and certification. You pay them. And unfortunately, the salmon fishers on west coast of Canada, the sockeye, chum, and pink salmon commercial fisheries just lost their Marine Stewardship Council certification. So, yeah, and that means they're going to get less money for the fish. They're going to be less desirable. They're not going to show up in the prestige restaurants. When even at the grocery stores, you're not going to see that MSC little bluefish logo anymore, the MSC on the packaging. And there's people that'll pay more for that, right? 50% of shoppers will pay a little bit more for that certification, that type of sustainability, that they know they're eating something that's not ruining the planet.
Show of hands. Does anyone here listening right now, just either thumbs up or hands up, whatever, do you look at the label? If you're buying seafood, do you look at the label to see if it's sustainable? And if so, do you believe it? Because at the end of the day, when you mention something like this, Lawrence, of course, there's a lot of questionable thought that goes hand in hand when you see a label that says sustainable. Because how could an agency be able to determine if a fishery is sustainable just by riding shotgun on a boat?
Oh, they've been criticized. Mm-hmm. But you know what? They might get it wrong once in a while, but they're not going to throw away their credibility on one fishery. When they're going around the world and saying yes, no, yes, yes, no, they're not going to just blow it, for one fishery, for one paycheck. They've got a bigger sort of long-term sort of goal in mind here, and that's not to get caught out, certifying one fishery as sustainable when it's not. So yeah, they've got some emphasis to get it right, that's for sure.
Yeah, and as I said, I'm glad to see that a lot of folks do. A lot of folks that are watching do pay attention to that.
Cool.
I do it whether I knowingly know that it's actually being properly researched and there is science to back these claims up.
Yeah,
whether it's right or or it's actually happening, there is a sense in me, and I'm sure everybody has the same sense, that at the end of the day, we have to do our part to make sure that these fisheries are sustainable. As much as we like to eat them, we also have to make sure that we're conscious of that. So if you are doing it, whether it's right or wrong, whether there's science to back it up, good on you for doing so.
Yeah, Ocean Wise is just getting bigger and bigger. They're the ones that put the little smiley fish in the menus in the restaurants. The restaurants pay for that, and they'll put it beside each menu item, seafood item that is a sustainable seafood choice, and it won't be beside the ones that's not, right? So this is, I think the ones that started it was Seafood Watch out of the Monterey Aquarium, and it's the green, yellow, red light, and that's you can get that locally for local fisheries. You need to get these things that are locally certified, locally reflecting, the fish in the area. So what happens on the Pacific coast is not relevant to what happens in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, which is why the Aquarium du Quebec has their own version of Seafood Watch for the Gulf of St. Lawrence fisheries. So these sorts of things are catching on and they're proliferating, and people are paying attention. And people, when they put their money where their mouth is, the people behind producing those products pay attention.
Amen. Well, you know what? Let's do our part.
Yeah.
And keep doing our part by the sounds of it, because everybody is conscious of that. So awesome. Lawrence, what's up next?
5,000 critters in Canada at risk of extinction, according to a recent survey report by a pretty credible science. So here, I got a few of the critters they've counted up here that are at risk. There we go.
Wow.
So 1 in 5, basically 1 in 5 species in Canada are potentially at risk. They're not endangered. They're not at the edge of being tipped into oblivion, but they are heading in that direction. So 24 mammals, 43 fish species, 9 amphibians, 17 reptiles, 50 birds. So and there's a lot of bugs, a lot of bugs. But so they cover the gamut, right? And then into the trees and plants too. But I just picked out some of the ones I thought we'd be interested in. So that's this is the biodiversity thing, right? You know, a lot of the World Wildlife Federation has been talking about loss of biodiversity. To put it in the perspective, Canada's not doing that bad. You know, look at we've got this huge, the biggest contiguous forest in the world. You know, we've got we're next to the largest freshwater basin in the world with the Great Lakes. We've got a lot of things, the longest coastline in the world. So we've got a lot of nature in this big giant country of ours with not a lot of people. So, you know, we're doing pretty good. When you go to some of these other smaller countries where there's a lot of poverty and starvation and people are eating everything they can catch and kill, it's a different story. Or Brazil, you know, burning down the rainforest. You know, I mean, we're not perfect, but we're not ruining it either. So there's some perspective, and I think we should be proud of ourselves. But obviously, this report has counted 5,000 things in Canada that are not doing so well.
Now, are these mammals, insects, birds, animals, fish? Were they already on a list, or are they newly placed on this list?
It's gotten worse. Yeah, it's gotten worse. Yeah. So maybe the science is getting better too, right? So, you know, the science now versus the science 5 years ago, you know, we have more science, we have more data, we have more baselines to measure against. So,
right.
So we're getting it's you know, sometimes more news is not good news, but this is maybe the case of that. But at least we know, and we've asked, and now we know. So yeah, there's more reason to pay attention right now that we know. We can't ignore it anymore.
Now I have to ask, and I don't mean to be funny, but we're not one of the mammals, are we?
Well, I think our population is not increasing. No. If it wasn't for immigrants, we'd be probably decreasing in size.
100%.
Yeah,
it's terrifying to hear. We have that many, especially with, as you mentioned, insects, and insects are on the rise. Perhaps maybe not bumblebees, and we'd like to see a lot more of them running around. But
bumblebees and dragonflies are going down. Insects in general, the insect population in general is decreasing quite a bit.
Yeah,
it's quite disturbing.
So the good insect populations are decreasing, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow, what a mess.
Yeah. Birds.
Okay, so do we have some good news, Lawrence?
I'm gonna try to get there. Hang on. Oh no, you don't want to hear that. That's from the OC to Canada. Their survey of fish stocks. 1 in 5 fish stocks in trouble. Worse now than it was in 2016. You know, we got to work harder. Let's just skip over that one then.
Yeah. Wow. Gloom and doom just before the Christmas holidays.
Oh, here's one. The BC researchers have developed a fit chip, like those little things that monitor your heart rate and stress level and all that stuff. So they're putting them into salmon and fish, and they can monitor how the fish are feeling and doing physically, emotionally, in a sense, like, are they stressed? And they release these fish. And it's quite astonishing that they can do this now, right? So they can not only locate the fish and with tracking devices or a tag that if you catch the fish, you can report, catching the fish. Now they can actually track how the fish are doing, like physically doing and experiencing their environment. This is really cool stuff.
Are you serious?
Yeah, the fit chip. They call it the fit chip. The fit chip for fish.
So not only do we have these transmitters that are able to figure out where these fish go and migrate to, now we can find out their stress levels and how they're feeling.
Yeah. And when fish get anxious, if they're feeling bad, if they're in water with low oxygen or not enough food or too much heat, they can measure the effects of that on the fish now.
Holy smokes.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
And we talk about flashers and live scopes. And technology, man, that just blew us out of the water.
Oh yeah. The information is flowing at us fast, and we got to learn how to deal with it and make sense of it, not just get overwhelmed by it.
Holy cow! Wow. Well, that's interesting news. I don't know if it's good news. As Ed McKenzie, that's almost too far. Yeah, it might be, but wow, incredible.
Here's something else going on. Montreal is the location of the COP15 biodiversity international meetings this time around. It's a once a year. They haven't had it in the last 2 years because of COVID. They call it COP15. I got, the community of partners. And this one is all about biodiversity. And 196 countries gathering in Montreal to talk about biodiversity and how to make sure that it's resilient. It's going to be around, right? To stop this, as the population of the planet grows and we turn more land into farmland and play land and move out of the cities, in some ways and have properties. We lose biodiversity. It happens all over the world. So how do we make sure that that's not going to be a problem? So these people are meeting about that. Our Prime Minister made an announcement there. $800 million for 4 Indigenous-led conserved and protected areas in Canada's far north, I believe. 4 giant areas of land that's going to be managed by Indigenous people in partnership with government, and a science. So there'll be lots of partners and working together on that. And this is all heading towards, protecting 30% of our marine, 30% of our land, 30% of our lakes and rivers by the year 2030. So, these 4 giant areas will get us partway there. But even then, when we get to 2030 and we've covered 30%, there's still 70% that haven't been covered by anything, right? So it's up to all of us to keep an eye on all of it.
And
right?
I don't mean to be cynical. I just hope we don't sell it all first, because there seems to be an appetite for us to sell a lot of our resources and land foreign ownership. So 30% is a big number.
Yeah.
As long as we own it, and there's still a whole bunch of, as you mentioned, left to still go. But great piece. Couple more, Lawrence.
All right. So seagrass is, turns out fish that are living around seagrass, where the seagrass is healthy, do quite well when there's giant storms and storm surges and super high tides and big strong currents. The seagrass buffers the fish from all of that, and they don't have to go running for cover and get swept out to sea. So more reason why we want to keep our plants healthy, not just above land, but in the water too, right? Because look at the Great Lakes and look at the big waves that we see on the Great Lakes and all of that, more and more, right? So this is important to keep our weed beds healthy, and the fish will be healthy. They got a place to hang out, even in the rough weather.
Yeah, no, 100%. And kelp beds, seagrass, you name it. It doesn't matter. There's always life around it, which of course, it's concerning to me when you have these islands of plastic. These fish think that they're seagrass, or they're plankton blooms, or perhaps kelp beds. And the unfortunate part is it's not. And you've got all these little particles of plastic, and these fish don't know any different. But yes, keep the grass in the water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't tear out all that plant just because, just get your kids to get used to walking through it, swimming over it, and not being afraid of it. Hey, here's some bad news. Tuktoyaktuk up in Canada's Arctic. This is an Inuit community right on the Arctic coastline. I've been there. I spent a number of days there quite a few years ago. Like that was in 1989. But it's just a big gravel bed. It's just gravel, and it's all fairly flat, right? Mm-hmm. And they're losing a meter of shoreline every year. So the community is retreating backwards, but they're pretty concerned that they're going to have to just abandon that community at some point. And that's kind of crazy because they just finished building a road up to that community from Inuvik, a multi-million-dollar road, so that they could connect them by vehicle for the first time. I think that road opened 2 or 3 years ago. So if you want to drive that road, go up to Inuvik and rent a car and drive to Tuktoyaktuk and stick your toe in the Arctic Ocean, you better do it there while there's still some people there to meet you and greet you when you arrive, because this is not looking so good.
And is this happening? You said erosion. Now, is it happening because the ice is dragging the land back into the water, or they got major weather events up there that are causing this?
Oceans are rising. And the wave action, because there's less ice, there's more wave action, and it happens longer every year because there's less ice and more storms. So yeah, it's a combination of things. It doesn't take much to tip the balance up there. A little bit of change, down here, it doesn't seem to affect us so much, but up there, it's definitely having bigger effects. That's what we're finding out for sure. Bigger effects with less cause behind it.
Wow. We got time for one more, Lawrence.
Okay.
Shoot.
Okay, Abertford, BC. Oh, this is weird. You remember that big flood in that plain, the Sumas Plain on the Lower Fraser River last fall when that whole community got flooded out?
Yeah.
So it turns out there's a lot of painkiller and cocaine have been found in the flooded area after that water retreated. So the natural habitat has been sort of corrupted with our recreational and pharmaceutical medications. That's weird.
Wow.
Yeah. That they're finding cocaine. Who the hell's doing all the cocaine? And who leaves their cocaine behind when there's a flood? But I guess if you're having to evacuate and you got to go to a shelter, you probably don't bring your big bag of cocaine with you, right? I don't know.
Yeah, that's awkward. And ibuprofen, like people are just throwing that in the river too. Like,
I guess it got all sucked out from those houses, right?
But I will say they did a study, and I know I've talked about it here. I'll be real quick, but when they did a study on the fat tissue of coastal salmon off the BC coast, ibuprofen was the largest compound that they found in the fatty tissue.
Yeah,
so I'm not surprised. Yeah. However, I'm a little surprised that cocaine is
cocaine. This is wow. That's there you go.
Incredible. Well, Lawrence, as always, a vast amount of information, entertaining information, enlightening, not so happy. So I'm glad to see that we're gauging the fish to see if they're happy, but unfortunately we need to do more for ourselves because some of this news, unfortunately, is not sunshine and rainbows. So,
well, those fish in Abbotsford might be happy. I'm not sure.
So there's that. Yes. As always, Lawrence, thanks so much for tuning in each Monday with us and spending this kind of time. And of course, if you want to see this segment or hear this segment on a podcast, Bluefish Radio will be taking this recording and broadcasting it there. So, Lawrence, thanks so much for bringing us onto your platform as we rejoice that you're on ours.
Thanks you, Scotty. Appreciate that. And thanks, everybody, for taking the time to hear me.
Right on, dude. Have a great week.
Thanks, man.
Bye now. As always, whether you like to hear it or not, it's news. But that last bit, I have to say, I'm a little surprised at that. Anyway, here is a word from Jay's sponsor. He'll be coming up next.
Want to know the difference between power bait and other soft plastics? Ask the fish. Berkeley scientists have thousands of flavors tested on thousands of fish. Natural, man-made. Every bait that's ever hit the water. No matter the shape, size, or color, power bait is the only one that is scientifically proven. Fish bite and will not let go.
Jay Barnucz in the house.
Hey, Scotty, what's happening, man?
Well, I hear. I think I'm speechless at that last bit that Lawrence shared with us. I can certainly understand ibuprofen to a certain degree because, as I said, they did do a study and they found lots of that in the fatty tissue of the BC salmon. However, cocaine, what are we growing out there?
You know what, man? I have research friends that are involved in wastewater treatment, especially in the Great Lakes Basin, and it would blow your mind the amount of pharmaceuticals and other chemicals that are in the water that we can't filter out. We can't. This stuff just stays in the environment, and we don't know how to deal with it. It's kind of scary stuff, to be honest.
Yeah. And that is extremely scary, what we just learned. But as always, he has tidbits of information that, of course, I haven't even heard of. I'm so glad he comes to share it and enlighten us. But I know you have a bunch of stuff that you also want to share And does it start with steelhead fishing or hard?
No steelhead fishing, man. It's still, this past weekend actually was we spent some time with family. So Heather's folks had us for Christmas on Saturday, so that was nice. So we got together with the family, and which was very sporadic the last couple of years. So it was nice just to get together and have a proper Christmas dinner. So that was great. And maybe selfishly, it's kind of nice that we get the festivities out of the way as we get closer to ice fishing season. So it frees up my calendar. Right.
Now, speaking of ice fishing, when
Sure.
Jim and I were talking, I can't imagine you going back in time and ice fishing like they used to do, where they would literally drill one hole if they were lucky, maybe two, and they would sit over top of a hole all day in the cold without any kind of barriers or protection and just stuff it out. Can you imagine?
And I reflect back on, I'll just touch on that a bit about what you and Jim are talking about, where, I remember when I just finished university, and before that, so when I was still in university, I was in Peterborough at Trent, and we'd go up north fishing like Halliburton, Minden area. The Kawarthas in those days were closed to ice fishing. This is 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And so we'd go up to Halliburton and Minden and fish for brook trout and stocked lakes. And Heather and I were reminiscing about bombing around in my old Grand Am, Pontiac Grand Am, no snow tires, just giving her up the 118 through Carnarvon. You know what I'm talking about, Scotty.
100%.
And, we didn't have much, man. We had a 5-gallon bucket and a couple of old Mitchell used to make these brush and stick rods that were like pool cues. I still got one here in the basement somewhere. And we'd catch brook trout in little stock lakes and stuff. And we did a lot of sitting because it would take me, I don't know, my old Moira auger in a foot of ice. It would take me so long to cut a hole that I'd cut 3 holes and I'd be done.
Yep.
Like I'd be totally tapped out. Now I have a hammer drill with a K drill attachment, and I'm just trucking along, one-handed popping out. I was explaining this at the ice fishing show that even, when Trevor was little and he wasn't as helpful as he is now, like I'd have a flasher in one hand. This is just like 3 or 4 years ago. Flasher in one hand, K drill in the other. I would drill with the K drill with one hand and check the hole with the flasher while it's running. And I would just go down the lake and just pop a hole, check it, pop a hole and check it. And, I'm not joking. I fish for 5 minutes. Sometimes I don't fish a hole at all. If I don't mark any fish, I keep moving. And it's because of the technology now.
Yeah.
We're able to get around and be more efficient now. So, ice fishing is becoming so much more like open water fishing now, where you're as limited as you want to be. Even in open water fishing, I have good friends who love to go drop an anchor in Lake Erie and fish for perch that way, right? And I have others who like to go drift for them, and others who, we're using spot lock and we're moving on schools, right? So there's all these different ways to fish, and with ice fishing now, there's no reason to not be mobile, and I'm not going to say always on the fish, but you're going to put the odds in your favor being more mobile and having all that technology. A big one I wanted to bring up tonight, because it's a great time of year, these in between seasons, Scotty, where we're waiting for something to get going. It's like we're waiting for a shoe to drop. And
it's true.
I get a lot of comments about Smitty sleds, and and I've brought it up on the show before, and I wanted to share a couple of things with the group, because this is a great time of year for projects, and there's some great projects on Smitty sleds. The Smitty sleds are becoming such a popular way to get around on the ice. And if you don't have a machine to get around, and you live, especially here in Southern Ontario, like where we live, even the lakes that when I fish, the small inland lakes, you can't even get a machine to the lake. Like some of them are public land, and they don't allow even motorized vehicles. You're on foot. You want to get to that little reservoir, you got to go on foot. So I shared 2 links in the chat. One is a really cool YouTube video that I used years ago to build my first Smitty sled, and it's a DIY project, and the woman in the video explains how she built her Smitty sled, and it's collapsible. And what I love about that design is if you have a vehicle, a small vehicle, you can build this Smitty sled out of some very basic components with wood and some lag bolts. Just go to your pawn shop or go on Facebook Marketplace and just buy some old skis for a few dollars. And if you got a few tools and a place to work, you can build a sled really easy. And then you can get into I'll share a link. The one other link I shared is a Facebook group that is really big on Smitty sleds and how to design Smitty sleds, and just great ingenuity shared by ice anglers from across North America, basically. And, and all this conversation stems from actually a thread on the weekend where Gord Pizer built his first Smitty sled. And there was some incredible dialogue that just went on with all these great DIY people.
Yeah.
Now, the other link I'm going to share, and, this kind of goes with the fishing rod comment that Jim made about, we used to fish with $5 rods and now we're getting up to more expensive rods. Erie Secrets is a company out of Woodstock, Ontario, that makes high-end Smitty sleds. And you can actually buy kits where if you can find yourself a set of skis, they make these plastic risers and aluminum parts that these sleds are super lightweight and you can accessorize them. So I actually have one of the very first Erie Secret sleds. It was one of his prototypes that I bought off him, and it's fantastic. And so, and why I'm sharing all this information with the listeners is there's so many countless ways to build these things. And so now, we have a Toyota Sienna van. That's our main fishing vehicle. And so what we do is the Smitty sled itself, I don't even take it apart anymore. I could. It just fits in the back. If I have the back seats up a bit, I got about 6 feet of room that we can just fit, skis and all, go right in the back of the van. But years ago, I would have to make things fit in a car or in a small SUV. And so you can do it any way you want, have to build a Smitty sled. It can be really cheap or really expensive. But, if you want to get out ice fishing, the biggest thing for me was being mobile. And for years I wasn't, because I didn't have tools like this. Now with my Smitty sled, and, I have my auger and I have my flashers and I have all kinds of nice gear to use. But I wouldn't go without my Smitty sled on the ice. It is literally the biggest game changer that I have, because I don't own any machines. And down here in the South, I wouldn't own an ATV for an 8 or 10 week ice season. It's not worth it, And I even think ATVs aren't the best. You should have a snowmobile for ice fishing if you want. And I have to wait for ice that's safe to do it. So I really encourage everyone who's listening, or if you know someone who's thinking about getting into ice fishing, try building a Smitty sled. Really, 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 really put some thought into it, and you are going to really enjoy ice fishing more. Because I'm going to tell you, probably 25 years ago, I didn't enjoy ice fishing as much as I do now. Yeah. My first flasher was a Dave Jens pack it was an FL8, and I had that for a few years, and I upgraded and I sold that unit, and I regret ever selling it, because I wish I had these old flashers to have for people to share when they came out with me. Does that make sense, Scotty? Some of these tools, it's like, man, I wish I still had all my flashers I ever owned, because then I would have something for everyone to use. Because once you experience ice fishing with the proper tools, it is such a more enjoyable sport. We're not sitting on buckets freezing anymore, right?
So this brings me to and it was Sally's comment that made me want to go back to this. So I'm glad this is a great segue. You did this awesome. But should we be thankful for the old ways because it taught us how to fish? Or should we be thankful of technology because it's made it more enjoyable? Again, there's an argument there that can be had on both sides. But did the old days really teach us how to fish, or just be patient?
I think the old days still taught us how to fish, but I think that you had to get the fundamentals. And I think you also had to get an appreciation for what you have. And I don't want to sound like that cynical old guy, but I guess as I'm getting towards cynical old guy age, I look at Trevor, and he never had to sit on frozen buckets. You know, he never, like, he's always had a shelter to sit in, right? He's never had to wear Wonder Bread bags on his socks, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I think Sally's right, but to a point. And I think just, you know, I love ice fishing more now, I think, because I appreciate what we have now, because I did it the old way, like a lot of us are talking about. You know, like one of my favorite memories is fishing on the tailgate of my grandfather's F-150, green, like lime green F-150, out in Long Point Bay, sitting on the tailgate catching perch on Long Point Bay in March, on March break one year. Like, that's one of my favorite memories. And getting chip truck fries afterwards. Like, that's, but that'll never happen again, man. You'll never see. Every year now, if there's ever one pickup truck on Long Point Bay, the public shaming that goes on because of and it's dangerous. I'm not gonna lie. Like, you're lucky out there to get enough ice for your ATV, even your big Argo, let alone a pickup truck, right? Like, those days are long gone. But it was those days that we appreciate and we look back on, right?
100%. So, Sally, to your point, I have more fun waiting for a nibble than watching a screen. As I said, that kind of thought from yesteryear, it's truly cherished, and hang on to it, because what's going on in this world now, that kind of stuff is going to be very soon and quickly forgotten.
Yeah, and I think too that I think sometimes maybe that's a fun way to ice fish now. Maybe if you're with a group of friends, you could say, okay, no electronics today. We're gonna have a little contest, and you got to catch fish without your electronics. I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there that would not show up that day if I proposed that idea. But, you know, I agree with you, Sally. I really do. I do. But I also appreciate where we've come, and I think that, especially too, like with the technology with ice suits now and things like that. Oh, Scotty, like, you're no longer cold. If you let yourself get cold, you've done something wrong. There's no reason to be cold anymore, you know. But in all of this, you got to haul all this shit around. Pardon my French, like, you know. And so I think that's why, you know, I was sharing the Smitty sled idea, because that kind of craft, building that Smitty sled, there's no one way to do it. There's so many different ways to do it. So I encourage everyone who's thinking about building one, build one, because they're so much fun. You can accessorize them any way you want, customize them, and even the one I have, I'm still tweaking it. I'm sitting here brainstorming today about how I can mount my hut better, my collapsible hub shelter, how I can mount it better on the side so it's not in the way because there's days I go out, I don't put the hub up, right? So I just have it on top of my sled, and so every time I want to get something else, I have to lift it off. So I'm thinking of ways that still makes it compact enough to still fit in the vehicle without having to take it apart. So, you know, it never ends, man. I love being able to brainstorm and design these things. So
100%. I'll have to say, hats off to George Morgan. What a question this is. The rapid increases in technology, like electronics and reliable lightweight augers, make it more difficult to determine if changes in angler catches are reflecting changes in fish population or just changing angler efficiency. Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question.
It is a loaded question. And George, you know what? I would first ask, what is your opinion? Do we have a better understanding of the fish population or the state of the fish population in a given body of water that we fish frequently, both in summer and in winter, because of our electronics? And does, obviously, without hands down, I think it makes every fishing trip way more efficient when we have this kind of technology with us. But is it an accurate depiction of the population, or are we just bettering the odds? It's a great question, George.
So there's a couple assumptions here. So one assumption, and I'm not putting anybody down, but I fish with a lot of people who have the best electronics you can ask for, and they don't know how to use it very well. They have it because someone told them to get it. And it doesn't mean they're necessarily a bad angler, but they could be a better angler if they used it better. So there's a lot of us out there that purchase this equipment that we don't even really know how to use it. So the other thing too is, I think that, like, the Live Scope has, there was an interesting podcast this morning. If anyone wants to listen to it, it was a really good one. So Dave Mercer does a podcast once a week with Matt Pangarak from Bass Talk Live. It's called The Cull. And the call is they ask each other a question. Let's say the question is, what was the biggest innovation in fishing technology? And the question was it mapping? And here's the question. Because of all this hype about live scope, what technology has had a greater change in fishing? So from what George has said, all of us read that, you jump right to live scope, freaking live scope. Everyone's using live scope. It's changing the game. It wasn't live scope to me. It's mapping, digital mapping. You're no longer out there with literally a paper map. I have 2 Rubbermaid bins here, Scotty, at home of paper maps that I should just recycle. I should literally just recycle, but I can't. It breaks my heart to recycle all those paper maps that I have. And I have them from all over the US and Canada. Like I used to collect hydrographic charts and I love them, but I'll never use them again the way I used to use them. Never. Because digital mapping has changed how we fish. I think more than sonar. Sonar came along with it, but digital mapping really, really, really changed how we fished a lot. And now we can go to a lake and we can know where we're going. Most lakes are mapped now. There's very few lakes that are unmapped. And if you don't have a map, you can make your own map of that lake with AutoChart and other features, right? So
yeah, the rule is changing. This is good. The rule is changing with tech. No longer do 10% of the anglers catch 90% of the fish. Yeah, absolutely. It can be a truth. And Steve, to your point, the only reason we don't bring George on is because I'd be out of my realm. I would literally just click off for the half-hour segment and let these two talk. No, I'm kidding. But yes, to your point, Steve, I think we should bring George on one of these nights, 100%.
So George's question is great. I'm really happy, or his answer here, his comment. Asking anglers how they're using electronics. So not only are they going to do a creel survey, which we all know what a creel survey is, but asking questions about how anglers are using electronics. So it's basically as a variable in the analysis. So if you're looking at catch rates, perhaps anglers with electronics are catching more fish than anglers without electronics, right? So it's a great question because there's a lot of information. Steve Cook is a good example of a researcher who's looking at the impacts of these, we'll call them enhanced electronics now, like 360 live scope, and how that's going to play a role in sport fishing. And it does play a role. I think one thing that it really does is it tells us how terrible we are at fishing, Scotty, because I have friends who have used it for ice fishing on small inland lakes, and they've sent me evidence of fish being scared of you. And this makes me rethink about my run and gun approach to ice fishing. I think what you have to do is you have to find your fish, but once you start catching them, you almost need to stop and chill, because I've seen examples, even in my own personal experience, where walking around the ice scares the fish away, and the electronics have showed us that. So, there's times to run around and there's times to sit still, and there is no right or wrong answer. I just think you have to start using your instincts more, getting back to what Sally was talking about. Be more of an instinctive angler as opposed to relying on your technology, because your technology will only get you so far. You still got to catch the fish yourself, right?
See, and this is where if people were to ask my opinion, what's more important, a flasher or electronic that is able to map bottom, or some kind of fish sonar? I would have to say it would be a combination of both. Some of these electronics that are out there, if you're trying to be that efficient angler, a flasher is great, but you have to be on the fish for that unit to be effective. Yep. What you want to know is where the points are, where those drop-offs are. So mapping, to your point, is something that should be available on your unit. And once you are where you think you are or need to be, that's when the flasher comes into play. But I get it. For folks who go out with just a flasher, good on them, because they're almost going old school. Yes, you can, certainly see that you're attracting fish off the bottom, and you can certainly change your presentation based on your knowledge of knowing that there's fish below you. But at the end of the day, if the fish aren't there, the flasher's useless. No.
Yeah. I think so. I think if you had to, like, we get into this all the time when it comes to fishing, like, where do you start, right? So what is the first thing that you buy? Well, now when it comes to mapping, if you have a cell phone, which the vast majority of us have a cell phone, and especially if you can get one that has data, I think, what's the going price of Navionics now? It's like $30 a year, $40 a year, somewhere in that price range. Like, before, we'd have to buy a handheld GPS at minimum, right? Because you didn't have Navionics on your phone. So you go out and you buy yourself a little Garmin GPS. Lowrance actually used to make one called an H2O GPS. I used to have one, and Lowrance made it. And so I had one of those, and you'd have to buy a mapping chip for it, which was a couple $100. And it was, dude, it was like playing like Pac-Man on this thing, like the big squares, and it's like an old Humminbird fish finder. Like, that was the quality of the screen. But that was the first really big purchase that I ever had for ice fishing, was that handheld GPS with the map. And then came the flasher. That's how I did it, And then once I had the two of those, I really didn't upgrade much over. Like, I've bought better flashers and different things, but really, you get yourself a decent flasher and a mapping and some sort of mapping ability, you're pretty much set. And I think for the average person, the average angler now, you have, if you have a liquid crystal display on your boat, you can buy an ice kit for it now and just plug and play, off you go. I've heard, though, this winter that people are having a hard time finding kits like transducers for different units, especially the helixes. I've heard that, and I've heard some of the also some of the Garmin ice deucers as well. So it tells me a lot of people who have typical recreational fish finders want to go ice fishing. They can't get the transducers, and I believe it's the manufacturing of the transducers. Like, we're still, I don't know. I don't think it's a COVID supply chain thing. I think it's just a straight up supply chain. There's more people ice fishing right now than has been before, and we're not used to having to have this, to sell this many transducers, for example. But I think that mapping and depth, those are the two things. And I don't even think seeing the fish is not as important as seeing the depth. Does that make sense, Scotty? Like, I don't need to see fish. 100%. If I just know that I'm on that drop off or I'm on that flat, seeing the fish is a bonus, right? So
100%. And Erica, to your point, I would say the biggest reason that you do catch awesome fish without using electronics is most likely because you do a lot of your homework prior to it freezing, and knowing some of the locations that hold fish, historically and traditionally, is definitely going to better your odds and put you in the right place when it does eventually freeze over. So lots of great comments. I tell you, it's this, you could talk about tech all night long, but at the end of the day, when to your point, I was shown by JP DeRose that you can, as you said, instead of having to drill 100 holes, the electronics now, you can read what's below the ice without actually drilling a hole in it, which is kind of cool.
And what's Ed's comment too, like when we get talking about, like, I know Ed knows the Bay of Quinte really well, and a lot of those spots on Quinte haven't changed over time. Those walleye on Quinte, they move around so much that it's more about being in that high percentage area with your setup. You don't need to move around too much. You just need to be at the right place, and you got to kind of intercept them. But that's for walleye in the Bay of Quinte that are sort of always on the move, right? They're always working their way somewhere. Whereas on maybe like on perch on Simcoe or bluegill in a small lake near me, you got to kind of run and gun a little bit more to stay on top of those fish, right? So depends on the species, but George's comment about shelters, that's a good one. That's a great comment, because with shelters now, you are bulletproof out there. You are absolutely bulletproof. Like, you don't need to have a shelter to ice fish, but boy, it is definitely the way to go if you can. And now with shelters hooked up to the back of a machine, flip over shelter, and you could be set up in fishing. And like, I read a really cool article from the guys from Angling Buzz, and on some of their lakes in Minnesota, what they do is they take their pickup truck with their GPS, and get this. So they're in their pickup truck on the lake, and they want to mark out a shoal. Okay. They take their truck or their snow machine, and they just drive the shoal with their snow machine. Then they turn around, and their trail is the outline of the shoal that they want to fish. So they just turn around and just basically connect the dots with their auger. Like the machine drew it out for them. Right. And then they just hunker down and fish. It's amazing.
Yeah, and let's face it, as I said, it's a efficient way of knowing where you are to make sure that you are on top of the fish. Sparkus says active target since April. I see fish on active target move outside of a 60-foot zone regularly. Neutral to negative smallmouth seem scared. Again, you hear that clicking, but I don't know, Jade. In your opinion, do you think that sonar clicking has an effect on the fish?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think so. All fish go through different moods, and I think you have to read the mood of the fish. And there's times in shallow water that I'll turn my unit off. What I love about my Vexilar is there's features within it that allows me to turn off. Like, I can go to these low power modes. So Vexilars run on very low power to begin with. That's what makes them great, because they last a lot longer than a lot of liquid crystals. And then even within there, it puts out, if you're fishing in less than 10 feet, let's say, you can turn down the power. There's a called the low power mode. It cuts your power in half. And then you can go into weed mode again, and it cuts it down again. And so basically what ends up happening is when you're in super shallow water, like less than 10 feet or even 15 feet, I can get rid of a lot of that background noise that the Vexilar is creating. And I think that helps a lot in shallow places that I fish. That's a great comment from George you just had up there. Where we, so everyone, just so you know, George is like, he knows his stuff in fisheries management. And, he's one of the data masters. I'm not going to give it too much away of where he works and what he does, but he knows fisheries data better than I do when it comes to recreational sport fish and ice fishing. I'm going to put that out there. So when he makes a comment like that, everyone should be writing this down or taking a picture of what he just put in there. So they actually see depth being a major factor in where anglers see fishing, depending on the species. So depth is very, very, very important. And, and having that mapping technology gets you out there, right? So for $40 a year, $40, dude, that's like what is $40, dude? I spend half of that on breakfast when I go ice fishing.
Right.
That's
years more expensive than that,
dude. That's two large coffees and 2 breakfast sandwiches, which gets me through most of the day. Right? Literally,
100%. And if it can do its part in getting some fish on the hard water, by all means, I'd buy it.
So Richard's comment here about 4 years on hardwood, I don't need electronics. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to believe that, because in those places like Harwood, in that part of Ontario, and I haven't fished that part of Ontario, but I fished in Quebec at the same latitudes, the same types of lakes, bottom bouncing for walleyes or jigging for walleyes. And if it wasn't for electronics getting me onto some of those spots and keeping me on those spots, I'm not talking about finding fish. I'm just like, am I on the top of the shoal, or am I on the side of the shoal, or am I on the bottom of, like, at where it meets the basin? Where am I in that spot? And I need to know what depth I'm at to be effective. And I don't know if I don't need electronics. I'm not going to.
Well, I will run to Richard's defense. He has had very productive outings. Every time the CFN retreat comes up, Jamie, Richard, or whoever he has in the boat do very, very well. In a lot of cases, they predominantly troll a certain shoreline, That shoreline always holds fish. So I would say, to your point, Richard, you didn't have to find the fish, but it just goes to show how productive Horwood Lake is.
True. That's true. All right, I'll give it. I will give it.
But it is, to your point, I will say I use my electronics because if you are not on that school and you move just outside of it, you're going to be sitting there jigging for a very long time and not being productive. When you have that ability to stay on top of the school, and the school moves, it moves. And if you're not on it, you're not going to catch fish.
To George's point, if he can catch walleye at Harwood, anyone can catch walleye at Harwood, because he doesn't like George is very he's anti-adipose, if anyone knows George. Okay, anti-adipose. And basically he likes bass. And he lives in a part of Ontario that you can fish for bass pretty much year round. So for him to even fish for walleye, I know, is an oddity. So if he can catch him there, that is a sales pitch right there for Horwood Lake Lodge.
And it is. I mean, again, not to pump the tires any more than we already have with CFN, but everybody can use a little bit of a pat on the back. Horwood Lake Lodge is like Lake Erie to me. It is a smaller version of Lake Erie. That's the cool. Most productive walleye fishery that I have been on outside of Lake Erie, that I've been able to collect or catch enough fish and feed our CFNers every night. We always have a fish fry, and it never, ever fails. And this lake, it has a lot of pressure, but it's a factory of walleye, and I hope it stays that way. Knock on wood. If it changes, I'd be really disappointed. But the one thing I will say about Horwood, and we talk about technology, I think what has kept that fishery, that walleye fishery, in check for so many years is the inability for folks to be able to target those larger fish. What we've seen, and I tried it once because I always wanted to do it at least once to try and see if we could do it, but being able to target those larger fish at a deeper, at depths that are greater than 40 feet is dangerous. And if we are promoting it, I don't know that we're doing a great service to Horwood. So I only wanted to do it once just to see what kind of fish we would be able to come up with. And I will say we tried not to get any deeper than 30 feet so that we didn't have to target. But
that's respecting the resource, and that's putting limits on yourself. So because you want to respect and conserve that resource, and that actually goes to Steve's comment about electronics and fisheries that he just put in the chat, where what's going to happen to our fisheries with these electronics. And there are researchers out there right now investigating this, because there are some groups that have concern about how will these electronics impact our fishing. So in terms of quality of fishery, right? And I think the reality is, we just have to go back to the Gord Pizer comments on greed and don't be greedy. Yeah. But it's very tempting when some of these electronics could put an edge in your favor. So.
Yes. And yes, Barry, to your question, there are, we've marked them. I've had the pleasure of being out with Tyler and Mark, and we have marked them deeper than 30 feet. Again, as Richard said, targeting fish at 40, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to kill them if you're catching them at 30. Yeah. Depending on how fast they come up, they could bulge out and their bladders get tossed into their throats even at 20 feet. I've seen it happen. But targeting fish any deeper than 30 feet, at least walleye anyway, is a definite no-no for most of the CFNers, if not all of them, that come to the retreat. So big shout out to all of you for, as you said, respecting the resource.
Well, I think that reason alone, and this is just my own opinion, that reason alone is the reason why we have lost some of the best crappie fisheries in Southern Ontario. Is that reason? Is some of these lakes that are closer to, like, let's say within an hour north of Toronto, and we're gonna draw a line kind of around that, like Port Carling, Perry Sound, Port Loring. You're not quite to Nipissing, but you're in that sort of in between area. And there's a lot of great lakes up there that have great crappie fishing, where the crappie are deep, and those lakes have been through ups and downs, a lot of downs. And I don't want to give any lake names away, but I can think of two that I used to fish back in, well, right around the time Trevor was born, so 15 years ago. And they were already on the downhill then. And I have friends who still go up there to some of them, and all I hear is how they can't catch crappie in there anymore. And these lakes used to produce incredible amounts of crappie.
Yep.
And a lot of it is because anglers, it's not as much the harvest, it's you're catching crappie out of 30 to 40 feet of water in a Canadian Shield lake. They can't handle it. And even if you let them go, they can't survive that barotrauma. They can't. And we have to, as anglers, we have to be respectful of the fish, and not enough of us do that. So these comments about these giant Horwood Lake breeding, these are breeders in Horwood Lake. You want to catch them. You really do. Like, you're torn. I get it, but you don't want to catch them, because those fish are the lifeblood of that lake, right?
Yeah, and I'm seeing more and more locals using downriggers and dipsy divers to get down to those depths. So again, it's a conscious effort for all of the whether it's the lodge owners, the MNR themselves, but just as anglers, making sure that we're conscious of how we're fishing and what effects we're doing to the fishery. Jay,
well, I'm going to say one more thing.
Yeah.
They don't allow ice fishing, do they?
Ice fishing is allowed.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting. It's not something that Mike really pushed.
It's not promoted. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, it wasn't. But if you go up there, you go out into the main basin where basically all the rivers or inlets connect. There are quite a few huts out there, but it being a reservoir type lake, of course, you're dealing with unbelievable conditions. You could have 3-4 feet of ice, but the first 3 feet of it is just slush. So it's not very comfortable in a lot of cases to fish Horwood, but it is not something that is promoted necessarily by the folks up at that own Horwood Lake Lodge, but it is done.
I'm going to throw a couple of quick links in the chat, and folks can check them out. One is, this is what I'll end with. So there is actually a couple of events coming up. One is the Lake Simcoe Jumbo Throwdown, and it's a ice fishing derby happening on Lake Simcoe this winter. I believe it's through most of the month of February, and it's actually a catch and release event being run through Fish Donkey.
Nice.
So which is awesome, and I really, really support these live release events. And it's very similar rules to the CFN Fish Off. It's a picture of you with the fish and the fish itself on the board, and it's going to be a video release, and it's biggest fish overall, and then your stringer best 5 perch, and they're going to have as many as they'll have lots of different prizes, and the more entries they get, the more paybacks you'll have. And the other one I'm going to put in there is a new type of tournament coming out of our friends at Tackle Depot, which is like that High Falls Outfitters in Belleville. It's called the Wicked Walleye Challenge, and they're going to have a walleye tournament on Big Bay this coming January, the weekend of January, on Saturday, January 21st. And they're going to have all kinds so watch the video to get all the details. It's live release again, and they're not using an app. They're going to have people on the ice in Big Bay that will come to you to measure your fish using, that 3 words app, Scotty, that's out there, that location app.
Yeah.
So you have to send your 3 words to the organizers, and they'll come to you on Big Bay. And they have tons of sponsors. They're going to have food and bait and all. It's going to be big. It's going to be big.
Awesome.
Again, we hope the ice is safe, and that's usually a good time for Big Bay, that 3rd week of January. It's going to be a big event, and both of them are $50 to enter. The one on 20 is an hourly first, second, third fish every hour. So it's a big like a big bass derby, but it's walleye. That's and awesome. It's all live release. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to win something, right? With 3 prizes every hour. So check it out. And if I get more information, because I think they're pretty cool events, and I'll be sharing that as we get closer to those events. So
fantastic, Jay. Well, as always, dude, thanks so much for sharing your time with us. and bring us up to date with what we should know, or what we don't know, and what we need to know. As always, Bud, it is a pleasure to speak with you every Monday.
Thanks, everyone. Great talk.
Take care, dude. All the best. And speaking of winning, if you haven't already, make sure you have signed up. I can't believe how many ballots have been casted. But if you want to fish like a Beeler for Christmas and get their tackle box stuffed with a whole bunch of stuff, incredible and generous companies that have donated a plethora of stuff, including, Big Jim, you've got Meigs there. You've got Accessible Angling, True North Baits, Cabby's Custom Jigs, Ugly Boys Baits, River Reapers, and of course, Fishing with C4 Lures. Again, if make sure you tag 3 people, wish them a Merry Christmas. If they tag you back, that equals 6 ballots. You could do more. You can wish anybody and everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. But if 3 of them tag you back after you have tagged them, you're going to get 6 ballots. And as it is right now, we are just below 700 ballots. It's incredible, the feedback that we've been getting from this. So again, if you are interested, please enter. It will be the pin post at the top of the CFN Facebook page. And we look forward to dishing out this gift on Boxing Day. Hopefully you join us Boxing Day. And we have one more show, I think it is, before we get close to the big man and his journey from the North Pole. But until then, be patient. If you're out fishing on the hard water, stay safe. God bless you. Love you all. Take care and have a great week. Dave, it's all you, baby. You know what to do.
Well, as much as I hate to admit it, I guess we've run out of time. So I've enjoyed it, but I'm going to do something I haven't done since season 1. Turn out the lights. The party's over. They say that all good things